A very warm welcome to all of you. Herzlich willkommen. Bienvenue à toutes et à tous. We are delighted that you're here for this lunchtime pirate cruise with Alex Barker, who's an author, speaker, strategist, and professional pirate. And it may well be April Fool's Day today, but this session is no joke. The public needs the public sector to stage a mutiny. And this was already well known before the pandemic, but the message that the past months have delivered to all of us really couldn't be clearer. We can't possibly go on like we have before. And the good news is that the ship for all of this hasn't sailed yet, but we don't have much time left, we'd argue, and we're deadly serious about this, and so is Alex, and so also I'm confident for all of you. My name is Danny Berkeley. I'm a co-founder and co-director of this small rogue vessel called Staatslabor. We want to change the way the public sector in Switzerland thinks, acts, and feels. And we do that by bringing together ragtag bands of pioneers and change makers in government, just like today with all of you. And we also do that by working directly with government entities on innovation projects. I'm not here alone today. I'm here with some of my wonderful colleagues and friends from our team, Alenka Bonner, Christa Schlechten, Jana Walda, and Medea Fuchs. You can see them waving right now, or you can recognize some of them by the very dramatic wintry backdrop that they've got. Now, Switzerland is, of course, very much a landlocked country. We've got plenty of mountains, but not a whole lot of open seas. However, as you will find out, there is still much we can learn from pirates. And here to teach us about professional rule breaking and stirring up some good trouble is Alex Barker. Alex is an author, an activist, a consultant, and a community builder. She splits her time between building the Be More Pirate community through events and projects and working with organizations across the private and public sector on strategy, culture change, and how to constructively challenge the status quo. She is also the co-author of How to Be More Pirate, the second book, which captures the stories and impact of this book here, Be More Pirate, that this book has had across the world. Alex, we're absolutely delighted that you're here with us today. Thank you for being here. The deck is all yours.
Thank you very much. And I'm really apologise if you can hear some background noise because they've just decided to empty all the bins outside my flat. It's just one of those things about working from home. So yes, let's kick off anyway. So how to be more pirate. I'm going to start at the beginning of this story with how I even got here. Because as Danny's explained, Be More Pirate really began life as a book. This is a book by my co-pirate and colleague, Sam Conniff. This is Sam looking far grumpier than he actually is in real life. He's actually lovely and very optimistic. And Sam's a social entrepreneur who'd spent 20 years or so working with young people across South London, young disadvantaged people who were looking to start a career in the creative industries. And Be More Pirate was really a love letter to them. It was a way of expressing the kind of creativity, like creative rebellion that he felt was really needed, but also a venting of his own frustrations about the way that the system was still failing them, even though huge strides had been made with social enterprises and kind of big schemes to support youth. Fundamentally, they were still falling through the cracks, and he'd lost a lot of faith in leadership. However, the first time that I picked up Be More Pirate and read it, truth be told, I didn't really like it very much at all. I read about 3 pages, realized this was going to be all about social change, and I didn't really buy the clickbaity title of How to Take on the World and Win. I thought it was a really good marketing strategy, but not necessarily willing to follow through on that. So I think I sort of metaphorically chucked it across the room. And put it back down. And the reason why I felt that way was because I was in that same position as Sam was, really. I was feeling very, very disillusioned and skeptical about the big promises of change in the world. I'd spent 7 years working here. This is the RSA in London. Some of you may have heard of it, but it's the Royal Society for the Encouragement of the Arts, Manufactures and Commerce. It's an absolute mouthful. It began as a quite radical institution for social change back in the 1700s, but over time has become kind of fairly mainstream. It's now a social innovation charity. Yeah, so even though it bears this tagline of 21st century enlightenment, it felt internally that it was quite there was quite a lot of stagnation. And as I went on, and my role was communications manager, and as I went on, I really felt that we were talking about change, like putting that message out there over and over again. And yet, when it came to the really big issues that really mattered, nothing was really changing at all. We weren't even making a dent. You know, it was around sort of 2016 when, you know, Brexit happened and democracy felt like it was fracturing. And, you know, even though there were more charities and social enterprises springing up, inequality was growing and government schemes weren't really making a dent in that either. And then the whole kind of looming climate change debate, no one was really making an impact on that front prior to Extinction Rebellion, to be honest. So for me, it felt like, what are we really doing here? Like, what are we actually doing? Are we just patting ourselves on the back and feeling good about ourselves without really making a difference? And do we need something a hell of a lot more radical? And I never really seen myself as a particularly radical person, to be honest. So it was quite a surprise to me that I felt this way. But I didn't do anything radical at the time. I simply went off and took a sabbatical. I took myself off to the beach for a few months and tried to figure out what the hell to do. And that was when I came across Be More Pirate. And it was actually when I saw a job advert for a right-hand pirate. A friend sent it to me, that I looked it over and realized that this was the same guy of the book that I didn't like. And I went back then and read the book properly, and I read it the whole way through. And although I still had a lot of questions about how this would work, and was it going to work in reality, or was it just another big promise of change, I'd never seen it presented in this way before, with this kind of story behind it. So I went back and I interviewed for the job with Sam, and I went in pretty ballsy and sort of said, you know, is your book more style over substance? And he just said, you tell me. And then he explained that he'd received all these messages from people all over the world, explaining the kind of rules that they were breaking, the rebellions they were starting in their work, that they were quitting their jobs and starting things. And he just said, I don't know what to do. I haven't got control of this anymore. It feels like it's becoming something, and I need help. And that seemed like a very interesting proposition to me, but I'm quite practical. So I wanted to understand exactly how you be more pirates. What does it mean to be rules? What kind of rules are we talking about? And what are the parts of the book that really make an impact? And that's what the journey that I've been on. And I never expected it to become that I would sort of lead this whole thing and become a proper pirate and lead it as a social movement. I also never expected to write a second book, but there was so much substance in it that it did seem that we did need to really capture all these case studies of what we were seeing. And that's where How to Be More Pirate came from. And the line that was repeated back to me by our community the most frequently, in terms of what had resonated with them from the message, was this one: no one is coming to save you. We've reached a point now where leadership no longer has the answers, because the world is too complex, and we cannot understand the level of complexity from a point of top down anymore. And in that phrase, I think there's something incredibly liberating, but also terrifying. It's this sense that the systems and the institutions and rules that you've come to rely on to keep you safe and stable actually are more fragile than you ever imagine. But in that, you have to turn south, you have to turn inwards, you have to start to trust yourself. And that's incredibly empowering and starts to give you the door to real agency. And so people were finding themselves through this kind of message. And never has that been more true this year. Of course, as Danny said at the beginning, we have very experientially experienced uncertainty this year. I used to put this GIF up sort of pre-COVID and watch a room of blank faces go, yeah, I kind of get it, but I don't get it. And now people really get it, because we've felt it on a really visceral level, what it feels like to be in that moment of uncertainty. But this is the space for pirates. This is the moment of opportunity where there is a sense of uncertainty, but also a space to change the kind of behaviors, rules and norms. And I think the second thing that I learned from our community really was that the story of pirates is so powerful. And actually in the public sector, we're not very good at this. And this is definitely what I'd experienced. We don't create powerful enough hooks to engage people in the story of change. We need a unifying story again, that isn't polarizing, that helps everybody to become involved. And that's what Pirates gives people. It's the story of the everyman. And although, and it's surprising, I think that's what Be More Pirate revealed to people, that there was this surprise that they had no idea about. We grow up with this idea of pirates being these kind of Captain Hook-esque villains that are kind of bloodthirsty tyrants and cartoonish. When the truth, of course, is always a little bit more nuanced than that. The reality of pirates is probably a little bit more like this. And the period of history that Sam really uncovers in Be More Pirate is this tiny period, only about 30 years from sort of 1700 to 1730, what is known as the golden age of piracy. And it began with, a group of ordinary working class citizens who were predominantly sailors in the Navy. In Britain, the Navy was the biggest employer. And because of that, they were constantly over recruiting. And so, using some quite underhand methods, I have to say, they would pretty much go around the pubs and the ports and beat people on board the ships because they needed to over recruit, because the death rate of sailors on ships was about 40%. So it wasn't exactly an enticing profession. There was no guarantee that you got paid at the end, and you would quite often be subject to some pretty tyrannical captains, which for me changes the idea of why anyone would want to become a pirate. It was really more like a bid for freedom. And an escape of the kind of pretty awful working conditions. However, being a pirate wasn't necessarily easier than being a sailor on a Navy ship or a merchant ship. You had a whole different set of problems. You were suddenly on board a ship with a bunch of strangers that you'd never worked with before, with no one automatically in charge, no rules. But that's where the story gets interesting, and that's where the innovation of piracy comes from. They had to figure out a way of living and working together that actually worked. And so the first thing that pirates did was create zero entry on a ship. So you got real diversity. They'd pretty much take anyone. So hence you'd get female pirates. They would, if they could sneak themselves on board, they would be accepted. One of the most famous female pirates is Anne Bonny. I think that's a depiction of her on the right, although a slightly sordid one, I apologize. Next to her is Black Caesar, one of the many black pirate captains. So in the latter part of the golden age of piracy, they would regularly free slave ships and bring them on board as equal members of the crew. So it was the only place you'd see all these types of people working together at the time. And of course, on the far left, just to name your pirates, you've got the most famous pirate, Blackbeard. And then to the far left, this is Black Sam Bellamy, the youngest and richest of the pirates, sometimes known as the Robin Hood of the sea, because he was so benevolent and fair to his crew and even the people that he captured. So when you had this really diverse crew, you also gave everybody equal say, because that was the first thing that was going to prevent conflict on a crew. Everybody having an equal vote on all the decisions that were made on board a pirate ship. It was absolutely critical and made it more democratic than ancient Greece. They shared the power between the leadership. So they did create leadership. It wasn't devoid of roles and responsibilities, but the captain and the quartermaster were in charge, would split the power. Captain would kind of set the direction of sail and the strategy, whereas the quartermaster was in charge of the people, the crew, and looking after things like the punishment and the money. So they were very much the accountability to the crew, and ensuring that the captain didn't abuse the crew. And I think that this is a structure that could be well implemented today. I know we have things like an MD and a director, but there tends to be one person at the top, and the way that they work together isn't always as accountable as it could be. They also gave pirate crews had equal and transparent pay, because of course nothing causes conflict like money. So the captain would only get 2 times more than the rest of the crew, and everyone knew what everybody was getting, which was pretty amazing. They also pioneered workplace compensation, the first form of it really. So if you lost a leg or an eye in a battle, you would actually get some compensation. You weren't just left for dead like you would have been in the Navy. So, let's acknowledge that 17th century pirate ships were actually ahead of where the United States is today. Let that one sink in. And they were also incredibly dynamic and self-organizing. I think we have this idea of pirates, as being only out for themselves, and that they would, kill each other at the first chance. But that was absolutely not true. They saw the value in collaboration and working together, in order to draw strength and stand up to the establishment. So if they did fight a big battle, they would team up, and then they would scale right back down again afterwards, and kind of retain the autonomy. So there was no like central command and control structure. And the way that they differentiated between themselves and kept that independence was actually through the branding, the Jolly Roger. They were incredibly creative with the Jolly Roger. It wasn't just the skull and crossbones. They'd use different iterations of it. So they'd use skeletons and hourglasses and stuff to represent their crew. This was really, again, a strategic thing. It was a way to sort of dramatize the story of pirates so that people would keep away. It was a way to get into battle less. If you saw the skull and crossbones on the horizon, you knew to kind of keep back. And so pirates ended up actually being the least violent people on the sea at the time in terms of frequency, because they were always trying to preserve their resources. There was no particular desire to go and waste men and weaponry getting into a needless fight. So it really wasn't driven by any kind of bloodthirsty greed or anything like that, which I think, contradicts a lot of the stereotypes. And finally, the one that always surprises me the most is that pirates even had same-sex marriage rituals on board ships. They recognized and celebrated same-sex relationships, and it was so sophisticated, it even had an inheritance clause. So if your partner died, you would get their share of the treasure or whatever you'd accumulated, which I think goes to show that pirates were not troublemakers, they were innovators. They didn't necessarily to go out to change the world. I wouldn't ascribe that to them, nor was it necessarily a moral reason, although we can never really know. They only really went out to change their world. And that's, I think, the starting point for real innovation, figuring out what you can do now for you and going from that place. But the thing that underpins the pirate success really for me is this idea of the pirate code. It's the thing that gave pirate crews real transparency, accountability, and trust. And it's something that, again, I think is highly applicable today and something we could use more effectively. And I think that the key things are in the way that the pirates did create a code was that it was done completely through consensus. There was usually 5 to 10 articles or principles, and all of them were voted on unanimously by the crew. So even if one person didn't like an article, it wouldn't make it into the code. And it was really, again, a way to prevent conflict. So what we get today is, unfortunately, when decisions are made by a few people in an organization, you get this sort of simmering resentment underneath the surface, maybe not full-blown sword fights, but we don't necessarily decide our values and principles together. And I think that was something that came through in the first messages that Sam was receiving, that people were starting to get together and write a pirate code for the 21st century. And one of the most clear, detailed, and interesting pirate codes that we got was one of the first from a human rights NGO of all people. I think this is when Sam started to really take this idea seriously. They fight for children's rights around the world. And the director had read Be More Pirate and gotten to a point of many of the same conclusions that I had, that a lot of what charities were doing wasn't really changing the status quo at all. It was actually entrenching it. And so she asked herself this question, are we willing to simply fund ourselves into existence? Are we simply just, is what we're doing really just keeping ourselves going? Are we really changing anything? And she kind of said, I don't think we need a big old strategy document. I don't think we need a business plan. I think we need a pirate code. So she kind of put this proposition to her team. She said, should we really exist? She tried to invoke some of the pirate urgency and jeopardy, because knowing that if we don't do that, we tend to just kind of tick along business as usual until things get really bad. So she said, guys, let's get together. I want to know, if we were to close down in 6 months' time, what would we do with our work? Does any of it matter so much that we absolutely cannot give it away, or somebody else couldn't take it over? And so they went through this process of trying to see what was really unique about them. And from there, they built this code of their principles, their values, and their vision. And everybody got really, really excited because they'd stripped away all the stuff that didn't matter. And as a result, interestingly, their donors and their funders started to become more supportive, because suddenly they were bolder, they were braver, they stood out more. They'd been willing to, kind of shed some of the stuff that was really quite mainstream and they were doing for the sake of it. So it was a really powerful story of how a code can take you to some quite new places. But another person who really helped me to understand the value of a pirate code was this guy, and I am shoehorning a bit of a Swiss connection into this talk. This is Professor Andrew Sharman, who is the president of the Institution for Occupational Safety and Health. I almost always get that wrong. And also the MD of RMS Switzerland, a leadership and culture consultancy. And he said, you know, and I think health and safety was the sector that we least expected pirates. You know, it's full of rules and regulations, and we didn't expect that you'd get pirates. But he said, no, we have safety pirates, because culture is the one thing that helps create safety in a workplace. And culture doesn't come from giving people lots and lots of direct instructions and protocols to follow, because that has two major risks. If you give people lots and lots of instructions, there's a tendency for them to switch off. They stop using their judgment, and they stop being vigilant. And what you want is for people to be using their judgment and interpreting more like guidelines, which is kind of what a code is. It's more like guidelines than instructions. And the second thing is that if you create too much paperwork and procedure and rules, people take shortcuts anyway. It's human nature. So he's like, I am fully on board with the idea of a code being more effective as a way to create a safe environment, particularly in high-risk environments like medicine, military, construction, and things like that, which was a surprise to me. And it made me think a lot about, about what is missing in workplaces. And so I find that the code is sort of like an anchor for who you are. And the anchor is so important if you're going to challenge anything, because the next place that pirates need to go once you kind of established your code is to start to venture into the unknown territory, this idea of the edges of the map, which is really what I would call innovation. I hate using the word innovation because it's overused, it's too overly associated with technology. And actually innovation for me is always about discovery. It should always connotate discovery, which means you have to be in the darkness to an extent. You have to kind of not know what's coming. And I've seen too many places try to manage innovation and stifle it in the process, when actually you need to be it's a process of becoming more comfortable with being uncomfortable. And in that space, there is huge amounts of discovery and possibility and freedom. And so we always use the old pirate saying of "here there be dragons" off the edges of the map, because that's where the pirates would go. And the dragons are really your uncomfortable points of tension. And Sam and I were noticing that in our workshops, that level of uncomfortability with talking about the things that were really going on, and how people found it very, very difficult to be honest about what was really happening behind the scenes. And to back up our hunches, about a year ago, we did a survey to a small but representative sample of the workforce, just to kind of see if we were right about what we were seeing, because we were only seeing it anecdotally. So we asked this question: have you ever sat in a meeting and verbally agreed to align around an idea whilst internally disagreeing completely? And what we found was that 85% of people said, yeah, we are essentially saying yes when we mean no. So there's this incredible dichotomy of dishonesty going on. So we asked a follow-up question. Thinking about that question, did you then agree to the idea but offer no practical support at all? Agree and offer some practical support but not follow through? Agree and offer practical support to the idea while silently sabotaging its chances of success? And what we found here was that it wasn't quite as bad, but 65% of people were, in fact, not taking any action, and 10% were resorting to sabotage because they disliked what they were hearing so much. I mean, it was only a small sample, but we think it is representative. And what we can conclude from that was that conformity is literally killing business. We need to find a way to allow for a culture of challenge in organizations, not for the purpose of real disruption, for the purpose of getting better outcomes, to be honest. And I started to dive into this idea in more depth because I always like to do more research. That's just who I am. And I came across this term called intelligent disobedience, which is a term that comes from guide dogs. And it's really interesting. I think when you train a guide dog, you first have to train it to be obedient because it has to obey its human. It has to be able to keep the human safe in that respect. But it also then goes through a period of training where you actively train it to be disobedient because it has to be able to listen to its own instincts and its own judgment. Now, humans get no such training. We are taught through school to almost uniformly obey people in authority to the point of, some quite disastrous consequences. And I think more critically, people who do challenge can very, very easily be ostracized. And I think one of the reasons why that happens, and this is what I've observed and noticed as I've been doing this work, is that we're not particularly good at knowing how to challenge. Like the how is so critical. You don't want to just do it in the spur of the moment in anger and reaction to something you don't like. You have to be strategic about this. And so what Sam and I started to do in all of our workshops was to ask people to get better and start to practice asking difficult questions. First of all, figuring out what are the difficult but constructive questions that you need to ask. Like, what are the subjects that are not being put on the table? Whether it's things like, is this budget actually realistic? Like, are the timelines really going to work? Or things like, what do we do when people leave here? There are all kinds of these slightly taboo issues that don't get talked about. But if you can do this and constructively, you get a real competitive advantage because it's a level of transparency that isn't happening in most places. One team that I thought was incredibly brave and did this well, and I've put their story into the book, is I should say, this is the point about pirates going where others fear to tread. It was a team at Macmillan, which is a cancer charity. I don't know if they probably don't operate in Switzerland, but they are a big UK charity. And this is, a picture of them of a sex shop, because one of the taboo issues for their stakeholders, people experiencing cancer, was that they were not talking about sex at all after cancer. It was a really tricky taboo issue. They're quite a traditional charity, lots of older supporters, and yet the people who were coming through cancer really needed practical support and advice on how to recover after their body had changed. And so they started to, as a way to tackle this, they started to run sex and cancer workshops inside sex shops with trained professionals to talk about this in a non-clinical setting. And it's been really, really powerful. It's opened up a whole new avenue of content. They've felt braver and more and bolder as a result of it. So it's been a really great example of how to put a taboo issue on the table and use it and use it for success. But it plays into, I think, a bigger mutiny, which, it's been really interesting to Sam and I that health and social care has been the area where piracy has become the biggest. We are constantly getting requests to do talks or hearing stories from people across health and social care about how they need to be pirate or want to be pirate. And I think, it relates to that point that I made at the beginning about the fact that the Navy was the biggest employer at the time of pirates. In the UK, our National Health Service is our biggest employer. And in huge organizations with lots of hierarchy and lots of regulations, it's an amazing breeding ground for pirates. And what their rallying cry has really been is this idea of trying to rehumanize the system, that we've gotten to a point of starting from what the system or the organization wants and not what people want. And that's the starting point too often, and it needs to be reversed. And we need to bring back some of the empathy and the compassion that is getting lost because we're creating this echo chamber of efficiency. And I've seen some amazing examples of how to do this through our work. One of the key principles in Be More Pirate is about redistributing power and leveling the playing field. And very recently, actually, so this example isn't in the book, but I thought it was such a good one that I wanted to include because it's really relevant to the current situation, is something called Hexy time, which is the first time system for in the UK. And they've got so 100 people on there across all kinds of public sector, voluntary sector, health and social care organizations, swapping just 1 hour of time and kind of getting this skills and knowledge sharing going. And it hits lots of different points. Makes everybody's time and knowledge equal, because you're only sharing time and there's no money exchanged, like a normal time banking system. It's networking people. So you've kind of got this new power networking situation going on, where people are now building relationships, way across outside of the system silos, which is amazing. But they've got this amazing case study of how they were able to cover hospital shifts in one of our, in the UK, we have Nightingale hospitals, which are the COVID hospitals set up specifically to deal with COVID. And they were able to cover within a day, like 14 different shifts using people's time through the system. So no money exchange, they were able to deliver critical care just by using the slight flexibility in the system. Had they gone through the normal system, it would have cost several £1,000s and had not been done anywhere near within the time that it needed to be done. So it's cutting corners, but it's working. And the two guys that set it up are very much on the pirate train, on various levels, not asking for permission to do things, but making some pretty incredible strides as they go. There was another story that I wanted to share as well on this idea of redistribution of power and reorganization of how we work together, that was sent to me really recently from a woman who works in a mental health charity. And it speaks to this idea that that the bad rules or norms get created because they're created without the people that they're actually for. This idea that the leadership is making decisions from a point of not having the right information. So yes, a woman wrote to me and sort of explained what they'd done in her charity. And she said, I work for a mental health charity that punches well above its weight. However, I thought that there was more that we could do and adopt the principles of the book. I convinced the team that we should be pirate. It was a challenge, but we'd recently had this consultation across social media, which showed us that people didn't want to work with public sector organizations or charities to give them mental health support, because they didn't really trust us. They actually wanted to hear from their peers who were experiencing mental health challenges. And as a peer-led organization, it made sense for us to open up our social media channels to people who were supporting and following us and accessing our support, and let them take charge. And so we did. We let them take over our social media channels. But we only had 2 rules on this. You couldn't say anything that you wouldn't say to your gran or your boss, and you couldn't mention medication. And it was only those 2 rules. And as a result, they ended up launching a peer-led podcast, a newsletter, and they ended up rebranding entirely. And this is all kind of motivated by the Pirate Code. And as a result, they doubled their following and doubled their engagement and grew their income, just because of deciding to take what would traditionally be seen as a risk and opening up control to their community, the people that they support. So this, I thought, was a really incredible, powerful story of how the whole journey from the code to redistribution of power had actually ended up getting them results. And I think that the key thing for me in that story is the idea of simplicity. Those 2 points, they just gave people simple rules to follow and allowed them to interpret that, and that was enough to make it work. I think that speaks to the principle that pirates never had time for indirectness, so dishonesty, or inaction. It's just like, get started. Let's just do something. Let's try it out. And a great example from the public sector that I do talk about in the book comes from Manchester City Council. Manchester, it has a really big city council, and they had a big mandate for culture change in the last few years. But one of the sort of leaders within the council realized that the culture change probably wasn't going to happen if it came from trying to start it in all the official meetings, following the same kind of protocol. Like, culture change almost like has to happen outside the lines. So she just put a message out to a few people and said, shall we meet in the cafe down the road outside of hours? Let's have a coffee and really talk about what culture change might mean. And so they started, and they formed this really informal little pirate crew. And from there, they built a little code about what they were really trying to change. And one of those principles was, we want to bring the soul back into work. I think that was probably the most powerful of their articles. And what it led to was a small rule break. And this is a simple, what we would call a small, bold action, something that felt a bit scary, but was simple to do and could get out there quickly. So at the end of their email signatures, they put these four, wrong one, this one. They put these 4 points to break the tyranny of email culture. It was just a really simple starting point to change how people thought about email in the organization, because they were all getting too bogged down in email threads. And the power in it was that it's so visible, because every single time you send an email, that's what you see. So it's constantly reinforced. And that's a big point about creating new rules. Making them repeatable is one of the things that will obviously make them stick. And that was like the catalyst for them starting to really create that culture change that they wanted. And the kind of final example that I want to share with you was that it's not just health and social care that have really responded to pirates. We've also had a lot of crews across education, because education falls into a lot of the same traps around too much box ticking and following models that were essentially created in a different century, but haven't really been updated. And we've got crews across, we've got the National College of Education, have got kind of take everyone through a Be More Pirates course. We've got an incredible pirate school in Adelaide in Australia, who I also wrote about in the book. And they are probably the first official pirate school. They do everything differently and really have their flag flying high. And they predominantly take in disadvantaged kids who've been told that they'll never amount to anything. But I think the best example I want to give really is this comes in the chapter in the book about the edges of the map. It comes from a guy called Tej Samani, who started something called performance learning. Now, Tej is really interesting because he was kicked out of 3 schools before the age of 15, but he was really good at tennis. So he went on to become a pro tennis player. And as a result, learned loads about what it takes to perform well. Like what it takes, not just how technically good you are, but all the kind of mindset and performance and behaviors around performing well. And I think he's the person who's read everything you can possibly read about performance. But he wanted to take it back into the place that he'd failed, which was school. And so he created this thing called performance learning, which is essentially a shift from what to learn to how to learn. So all he focuses on what is it that helps kids to just learn anything. Doesn't matter what you're learning. It's tapping into the indicators that help them. So anything from like the perception of how the teacher views them, to the environment that they're in, to how they feel about a subject even before they've started it. And he uses a kind of AI system to do this. So he's blended technology with sort of human behavior. And it's 86% accurate in predicting grades now. And he's also made the whole platform like a bit of a game, so that kids are quite, it's a bit fun for them to engage with it. So, and he's getting kind of incredible results for doing this. But the thing that Tej said to me when he was talking about what Be More Pirate gave him, because he started this long before Be More Pirate, but reading the book helped take the company in a new direction, because he realized that he wasn't being bold or brave enough about the challenge that he was putting to education. He'd succumbed to those kind of invisible normalizing forces that we often get, and was doing a disservice to the kids and what he could offer them as a result. So Be More Pirate kind of gave him permission to be bolder about what this really was about, and kind of reclaim his space at the edges of the map. And I think that's been, to finish off, like that's been one of the most important parts of Be More Pirate, that you have to first start from the point of the inner rebellion, which is the first and the hardest thing to do, giving yourself permission to stand up. You're not going to challenge the status quo until you have stood up to yourself fundamentally. And there are all kinds of layers of permission that we don't even necessarily realize we're not giving ourselves. So that's always the starting point. It begins with you. And I think, yeah, I will stop there. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Alex, so much for being with us at this 40th edition of the Staatskantine. Our gratitude goes to you, but our gratitude as Staatslabor also goes to all of you, all the participants who are pirates inside the Navy, who take risks and who courageously work to make things happen. Thank you for doing that. And remember, a couple of things I'm taking away from this: the way things are is not the way things have to be. Give yourself permission, be a pirate in the Navy, go undercover, attack the structures, but not the people, break stupid rules, stir up good trouble, go for a small, bold action, and practice intelligent disobedience. And I hope that we all can go get the energy to do all of that over the long weekend.